The views expressed on the following broadcasts do not necessarily reflect those of KHLT, Take 12 Radio, or our affiliates. The opinions on this show should not be considered as medical, psychological, or professional advice and are those of the host, co-host, and guest. Take 12 Radio and KHLT Recovery Broadcasting are not affiliated with any particular 12-step fellowship.
One day at a time with its failures and fears, with portion of pain and burden of care, we must meet.
Welcome to Walking Through the Language of the Heart, a journey into the Grapevine writings of Alcoholics Anonymous co-founder Bill W. And now, here are your co-hosts, Chris S. and the Monty'man.
Indeed. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of a great show that is... It's getting a lot of coverage, Walking Through the Language of the Heart, which is the name of the book that Chris S. and myself have been going through line by line. And we apologize for not being with you the last couple of weeks. I've been sick. Chris is at the end of his not feeling too hot. But we're here with you this week, and hopefully things will go a little smoother as in the weeks to come. Also, if you've been listening to any of our other broadcasts, that's been kind of cattywampus too, because I've been down for the count. So everything's back on track. Scheduled shows are back on track. We have some amazing topics coming up on the other shows with our good friend and interventionist Matt Brown. I'm not going to tell you what they are. I want you to check it out for yourself. Go to take12radio.com. And if you want to get caught up on all these shows with Chris and myself, visit us at take12radio.com and click on the Recovery Workshops banner. And there you'll be able to link up and download for fun and for free. So these are Bill W.'s Grapevine writings from 1944 to 1970. And this week, what are we tackling there, Chris?
Monty, we're going to be talking about the clergy. You know, in the weeks prior to this, we were talking about the psychiatrists and we talked about the physicians. So now we're talking about the clergy, and these are all people who Bill Wilson had an enormous amount of respect for. Found the ones that would be supportive of Alcoholics Anonymous,
right,
and really appreciated that support, because I truly believe it gave us, in the early days, it gave us a legitimacy. There was something for real going on with these alcoholics, and I think it was pivotal, really, to the fellowship and the program growing in the ways that it did.
Don't you find it interesting, Chris? Don't you find it interesting that very early on it was recognized that we needed the medical and we needed the spiritual?
Yeah, and I still think that we do today.
Yes.
And we certainly need the clergy, because probably 80% of our meetings in the United States are because of a cooperative, friendly clergy allowing us, to meet in their space.
Right.
So Bill was brilliant at seeing exactly what was going to be necessary for the growth of this organization. And he would pay homage, where he thought it appropriate. And I have a feeling he's going to be paying some real homage to the clergy, because people like Sam Shoemaker was so pivotal. If you've ever read any Sam Shoemaker books, that they just smell like Alcoholics Anonymous. They really do. And that probably was Bill's first real spiritual advisor. He showed up at the Calvary Calvary Church's mission, while he was exploring the Oxford group. And there was Sam Shoemaker, who I believe really did recognize the power of spiritual living with alcoholics, with the drugs. It's unfortunate that Bill became so successful with the drugs that so many of them were showing up in the, in the devotional meetings that it started to cause a little bit of a ruffle. Right. But he was always very kind to Sam. And then Father Ed Dowling was a spiritual advisor for a while too in the early days. He was a Catholic. So Sam was Episcopal and Father Ed Dowling was Catholic.
And then years later we had Father Martin and all his talks, right? Yeah.
Well, there's I think the fellowship would be much smaller if it wasn't for religious leaders being members.
Sure.
I've known quite a few. When I was first getting sober, there was Father Leo was in all of our meetings, and we loved that guy. He retired to Florida in like 1991 or something, but I remember him very, 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 very well. I've had a lot of opportunity to get close to some clergy, who were supportive of home groups that I was a part of. So, yeah. So anyway, let's see what Bill has to say. This is on page 177 of Language of the Heart, and it was written in September 1957, and it's titled "The Clergy." Every river has a wellspring at its source. AA is like that too. In the beginning, there was a spring which poured out of a clergyman, Dr. Samuel Shoemaker. Way back in 1934, he began to teach us principles and attitudes that afterward came to full flower in AA's 12 steps for recovery. If ever there was a living water for drunks, this was it. We took the cup of grace that Sam held out and we drank, not forgetting to pass it on to others. Our gratitude goes up to him whose grace ever fills that cup, and out to Sam who first offered it to us. Bill is recognizing the spiritual principles that became the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous came from Sam, really, who was running the American headquarters of the Oxford group at that period of time, which was really based in London. But rivers must have tributaries, else they cannot travel far nor grow great. The ever-deepening stream of spirit on which we AAs journey to better things now has its myriad tributaries, branches which feed into the main current of the life of our whole fellowship. The most numerous and most vital of these streams of devotion and service have always come to us from our friends in the clergy.
Wow.
He's getting very wordy in these paragraphs.
Well, let's look at that sentence one more time. The most numerous and most vital of these streams of devotion and service have always come to us from the friends in the clergy. That flies in the face of some people that are hypercritical of the church today.
There's an enormous amount of, I won't even call it ignorance, Monty. I'll call it people who have opinions on things they don't really have knowledge of.
Right.
They have emotional knowledge and not a real true understanding. But the spirit. So here's what I believe. I believe that the recovery process for alcoholism is basically, the 12 steps are basically a pathway to connection with the divine.
Yeah.
And what we are as alcoholics is what we're suffering from is an enormous toxic experience of self-consciousness. We're managing our own life. We're prey to every kind of fear and selfishness known to man. And for us to be able to recover from alcoholism, we have to go from self-consciousness to what Bill and the early A's described as God consciousness. Now, what better place to learn that than religion, right?
Sure. You bet.
You know,
Yeah.
so what Bill really did was he de-religionized religion. Let me explain what I mean by that. He took all of the religious spiritual principles and reworded them in a way that would not be offensive to anyone and would not collide with anybody thinking that this was a Catholic organization or a Protestant organization, right?
Right.
So he understood that he needed to do that to be able to throw wide the barn doors so that everybody could come in, even those with huge amounts of prejudice against religion. And I think it was wise, but I also think that we need to understand from whence we came.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because I think with that will dissipate any prejudice we would have against organized religion. I mean, if it wasn't for organized religion, none of us would be sober.
Yeah. Amen to that. And I'm with you. Most people that I hear spout, rhetoric that is very critical of treatment, very critical of religion, very critical even of spirituality or other 12-step programs, don't really know the material. They've sat in meetings and they've parroted what other people have said, but they've really not done the investigation. And I'm not really interested in what those guys have to say, to tell you the truth.
Yeah. Experience trumps opinion.
Yeah, amen.
Every day of the week. But yeah. Listen. I'm guilty. In my early days, I was as guilty as anybody, and as critical as anybody of all kinds of things that I'm not anymore. We tend to stop fighting. We tend to pick different battles today than when we're brand new. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So anyway, hopefully, if there is anybody out there who still has prejudice against organized religion, in the big book, Bill begs you to lay that aside. And there's very few places in the book Alcoholics Anonymous where Bill begs us to do anything.
Yeah.
And he begs us to lay aside prejudice, even against organized religion. And that's how important I believe he thought it was. Listen, we're not trying to evangelize. We're not trying to get everybody to leave the AA meeting and come join our church or something. We're not about that. But there's a profound respect for what we have been granted or what we have borrowed from religion. There's a gratitude and a respect once you've become a recovered alcoholic.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
So anyway, let me illustrate. Few know that it was a minister who was the primary figure in forming AA's original board of trustees, who were to become the custodians of AA services worldwide. I am thinking of Willard S. Richardson, a friend and an associate of the Rockefellers. In 1937, we called upon Mr. Richardson to help us find a lot of money for AA work. Instead, he helped us to find ourselves. Largely because of his kindness and understanding, his devotion, and his hard work, AA's first board of trustees was formed and the writing of the big book was begun. He was the kind of giving that had no price tag on it. What our 7,000 groups today owe Uncle Dick Richardson, a clergyman, only God could possibly know. At the Rockefeller dinner meeting of 1940, another man of the cloth appeared. He was no other than Dr. Harry Emerson Fosdick. Harry Emerson Fosdick was a very famous author and lecturer at that period of time. As the main speaker for the non-alcoholics present, Dr. Fosdick became the first man of religion ever to stand right up before the general public and give us a big pat on the back. I often wonder how much this generous act required of his understanding, love, and sheer nerve. Here was a small bunch of so-called ex-drunks, virtually unknown. I still tremble when I think how America would have rocked with mirth if 2 or 3 of us AAs had turned up plastered in the spotlight of that famous dinner. Clergyman Fosdick had gone far out on the limb for us. We shall remember this always. Surely by hundreds and probably by thousands, our friends in the clergy have since continued to go out on the limb. They install our meetings in their basements and social halls. Never interfering with our affairs, they sit in the back rows explaining that they have come to AA to learn. When Sunday arrives, they preach sermons about us. They send us prospects and marvel at our progress. When we sometimes ask them to speak to us, they invariably apologize for their own ineffectiveness with alcoholics. This is humility for sure. Too much of it, perhaps. I want to mention something that I've always found kind of fascinating. I have probably been, without exaggeration, to 15,000 meetings in church basements. And very, very rarely will you see the minister of that church at all.
That's right.
In other words, they trust us with their space.
Yep.
And there have been times where where people of the clergy have attended the groups, and it was usually because they needed what we had.
Yeah.
I've had the opportunity to sponsor a priest.
Right.
But what they're doing is I think they understand at some level we bring people to God. Maybe not like they would with the teachings and the liturgy and stuff that they would have in their church service, but they know we bring people to God.
And I think that shows how much they trust God. You know what I mean? It really,
that's a good point.
It really, I'm with you. Most of my experience in 12-step meetings has been in churches, basements, or meeting halls. And I can only think of one time when the pastor ever poked his head around the corner. And we had a power outage or something, and he happened to be there, and it was something like that. But other than that, no. And you know what? You know how many drunks actively drinking have showed up to church and raised Cain? You know what I'm saying? And
how many cigarette butts? How many cigarette butts do we leave in their parking lot?
Right. And they still trust us, bless their hearts.
I think they know at some level.
Oh, yeah.
There's a meeting I've been loyal to for a long time, and there's 100 people in the basement on a Monday night, and there's only like 35 church members left. A lot of the Protestant religions, the mainstream Protestant religions are shrinking. If you're a Methodist, a Lutheran,
mm-hmm.
or a Presbyterian or something, your churches are getting smaller.
Yeah.
And I was talking to the Reverend, and he said, I just wish I had as much enthusiasm upstairs as you have downstairs.
Wow. Wow. Yeah.
All right. So when it comes to patience and tolerance, they are at their best. Of course, they soon learn that although sober, we A's can sometimes be grandiose and champion rationalizers. We can also be careless and irresponsible. They listen blandly when we tell by inference what a superior society we have. Once in a while, they hear experience and language at a meeting that would make practically anybody blush. But they never say a word or bat an eye. They take the nonsense side of AA in stride, sometimes with the patience of Job. They know we are really trying to grow up and they want to help. That's a great sentence because that is so true. We park in their space.
Yeah.
We break their door handles. We clog their drains with our coffee grounds. I mean, how many things, how many irresponsible things do we do? And it's rare that they'll kick us out.
Yeah.
For something. This stirring and round-the-clock demonstration by our friends in religion sets many of us to thinking. When we consider all that these priests and preachers have done for us, just what have we ever done for them? This is a good question indeed. One of the things, if I'm in a business meeting or something and they're talking about the treasury or whatever, I really try to stress we are self-supporting through our own contributions, right? And part of my talk will be, I know back in 1962, the church said we could rent this room for $10 a month, and they haven't raised our rent. But that doesn't necessarily mean we shouldn't pay more.
Right.
The heat costs $10. Because we go in there, we turn the thermostat up,
and we forget to turn it off.
And we use their electricity for our coffee pots, and so self-supporting through our own contributions would be paying a fair rent. And I know that's not the way a lot of AA meetings do it. Some of them do, but if we can get away with $10 a month, a lot of times we will. You know what I mean?
It might be a good idea. I don't know how well it would be received, but it might be a good idea that, once a year, once every couple of years, we sit down with leadership in the church and say, maybe we need to go over the finances here and figure out how we can contribute more, because we know costs have gone up and energy and all that. And they may turn us down and say, no, we want to keep it at this price. Well, you don't want to rob somebody of their blessing, so you don't want to dishonor them. But I'm sure there are clergy that would say, that would be so appreciated. We're hurting right now, especially with the decrease in membership. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. It's absolutely true. We've talked about this before, but I put at a minimum today $5 in the basket.
Yes.
I just do because I'm so grateful for the life I have today.
Mm-hmm.
And inflation and this, that, and the other thing, it became a tradition to put $1 in the basket.
Right.
In the 70s or something, right?
Yeah.
But that just doesn't
cover it.
What it used to cut. So all kinds of expenses have gone up. Coffee's gone up. It's just, it's kind of traditional to throw your $1 in. But how about thinking about that?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If you can afford a little more, put a little more in, and if let your gratitude be expressed through your wallet.
Yeah, I like that, Chris. Yeah, very good.
Though the following isn't strictly AA business, I cannot help but report when priests and ministers have done for many of us personally. Some AAs say, I don't need religion because AA is my religion. As a matter of fact, I used to take this tack myself. After enjoying the simple and comfortable view for some years, I finally awoke to the probability that there might be sources of spiritual teaching, wisdom, and assurance outside of AA. I recalled that preacher Sam probably had a lot to do with the vital spiritual experience that was my first gift of faith. He had also taught me principles by which I could survive and carry on. AA had provided me with the spiritual home and climate wherein I was welcome and could do useful work. This was very fine, all to the good. Yet I finally discovered that I needed more than this. Quite frankly, AA didn't try to answer all of my questions, however important they seemed to me. Like any other adolescent, I had begun to ask myself, who am I? Where did I come from? What is my purpose here? What is the real meaning of life? When the undertaker gets through with me, am I still alive or not? Where, if any place, do I go from here? Neither science nor philosophy seemed able to supply me with convincing answers. Naturally, I began to shop about in other directions, and I think I made a little progress. So Bill doesn't talk about this much, but he took Catholic instruction.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't become a Catholic.
Right.
He certainly learned absolutely tons of stuff from Sam Shoemaker, including what we have today in the 12 Steps, but didn't really become didn't stay with the Oxford group more than several years, and there were churches that he would go to. There was one in Connecticut that for many years he would attend, and it was a very progressive church, for the time.
Mm-hmm.
So I've heard a lot of people say that Dr. Bob was religious and Bill was spiritual or whatever.
Right.
I think that's simplifying something a little bit too much. I think that many of us are drawn toward many of us started in religion, right?
Sure.
But many of us are drawn there after the fact, and I personally read enormous amounts of religious literature. Enormous amounts.
Yeah.
Because I find what Bill was looking for. Where am I? Where did I come from? What's my purpose here? I've got all these questions. I need to discover more, and I find a lot of really great perspectives from the religious masters of the past. I just do.
So when I first started going to church, I went for purely selfish reasons. There was a a music group called the Masters Music Makers. At the time, I thought, what a corny title, right? But it was made up of junior high and high school kids, and actually, we were pretty decent. And it was pretty modern music for the time, right? And it was a little small Nazarene church, and I went to be in the group. I didn't go for any other reason other than to be in the limelight, because I could hit notes that a lot of males couldn't hit, and they were looking for a soprano. So I went with this group. I joined this group, and in the process, so let's skip way ahead. In the process of going through the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous with the guidance of a sponsor who had a relationship with God, I went from choosing to go to church to being drawn by the divine into a relationship. And even the good book says no man comes to the Father except he draws them. So it was just my power that took me to that music group, but it was God's power that drew me to him into a relationship. And that's when I had been to Bible college prior to this. That is when I really began to get hungry for this relationship with God. It was after my initial working of the 12 steps. Amazing.
Excuse me. I think that relationship with God is the only way out of the toxic experience of self-consciousness that is our alcoholism.
Yeah.
Yeah. I really do. And there's comfort in it. There's understanding. There's a sense of purpose. There's everything that, we're looking for in life is part of that journey.
Yeah. Amen.
Though still rather gun-shy about clergymen and their theology, I finally went back to them, the place where AA came from. If they had been able to teach me the principles on which I could recover, then perhaps they might now be able to tell me more about growth in understanding and in belief. Though my sobriety had come easy, the growing up business hadn't. Both emotional and spiritual growth have always been mighty difficult for me. My quest to understand myself and to better know God and his design for me became a matter of great urgency. The clergy, I reflected, must represent the accumulated wisdom of the ages in matters moral and theological. So I began to make friends with them. This time to listen and not to argue. He's talking about his deep spiritual development here, Monty.
Yeah.
This is cool. I can happily report that one of these clergymen has turned out to be the greatest friend, teacher, and advisor that I ever expect to have. Through the years, I have found in Father Ed Dowling much of the grace and understanding by which I can now grow, if only a little at a time. He is the finest living example of spirituality that I happen to know. He has often set my feet back on the path when otherwise I might have gone off on an indefinite dry bender. It is characteristic that he has never, in all these years, asked me to join his church.
Interesting.
You know, so Bill always told the story. He's like suffering from depression. He's sitting upstairs in the office of Alcoholics Anonymous, and there's somebody here to see you, Bill, and it's been raining outside. He's like, I don't feel like seeing anybody, and in walks Father Ed Dowling, and his life really did change right then and there. He just recognized in someone something that he wanted. This person has something I want. And Father Ed had physical ailments. He couldn't walk really well. He wasn't like a prime example of, virility or anything. There was just something deep about him that attracted Bill, and they became bonded that night. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's a story that Bill told millions of times, and it's powerful. Every once in a while, we will run into somebody who has the capacity to shift our perception, to change the way we perceive and behave in life.
Yes.
And Dowling was one of those guys. Therefore, it is with the deepest feeling that I here cast up AA's debt to the clergy. Without their works for us, AA could never have been born. Nearly every principle that we use came from them. Their example, their faith, and their belief in some part we have appropriated and made our own. Almost literally, we AAs owe our lives to them, our fortunes, and such salvation as each of us has found. Surely, this is an infinite debt.
Yeah.
And I don't think he could speak more highly of, the gifts that religion and the life that religion had given him.
I have to share this story. I may have shared it with you before. I know I've shared it on previous shows, but it's one of my favorite experiences that I've ever had when it comes to people poo-pooing organized religion. I was attending an AA meeting, and there was a speaker, and he spoke much like this. And at the end of the meeting, this gentleman was outside. Everybody was smoking and stuff, and I overheard him saying how much that he despised organized religion. So I couldn't help myself. And I said, what is it exactly about organized religion that you don't like? So he rattled off a couple things. He said, well, the first thing I don't like about it is they ask you for money. I said, okay, what's something else? So the second thing about it is there's a lot of, pomp and circumstances and candle lighting and that kind of thing. I just don't like that stuff. And I said, okay, what else? He goes, well, they stand behind a pulpit and they tell you that this is the only way to God, that this book right here is the only book. And I stopped him and I said, what you're describing to me is a Saturday night 10 p.m. speaker meeting at the local AA hall. That's exactly what I see happen. I've even heard people, not in a long time, but go, if you can't put $1 in the basket, what are you doing here? I've never heard a preacher say that, But it's funny how we are, isn't it? Our perceptions and anyway, it took him back, and he said, well, you make a good point, Monty. So I haven't seen that guy in a long time.
Yeah. Let me see if I can find something. Hang on one second.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I was looking for a piece of paper that I don't know where it is. Maybe next week I'll read it. But
okay.
So I was giving a talk. This is what it is that I can't find. I was giving a talk on spirituality one time, and I wanted to understand a little bit more about what spirituality was. I wanted to look up some descriptions and some definitions, and I found some that were pretty amazing. And I don't have it right now. I'm sorry to say.
That's okay.
But maybe I'll track it down for next week's meeting. But it gave a beautiful description of the difference between religion and spirituality, and it gave. I remember one of them. So spirituality is a personal inner pathway to connection with the divine. And it has to do with a sense of purpose in life, and that was a great description of spirituality. But the description of religion is it's the same thing, only with more of a format. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's formatted differently.
Sure.
But the end result
is the same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So why should we be critical of one over the other? It
Exactly.
just doesn't make any sense.
Exactly. Well, yeah. So, I've got friends who don't attend a church, but they are, if you really sit down and talk with them, their relationship on a biblical basis is extremely sound. But they are at the AA meeting hall every week, and they're giving away what God has so freely given to them. And I'm like, yeah, you're in church, guys. The Greek word for church is ekklesia, which simply means a body of people called out for a specific purpose. So there you go.
Yeah. No, that's pretty good.
All right, good deal. Next week, press, radio, and television. Well, we'll see about that.
Yeah, that has to do with a little bit of tradition, a little bit of our public relations policy.
Yeah. Well, Chris, I hope you get feeling completely well, and we'll see you next week.
All right, Monty.
All right, my friend. Until our next broadcast, folks, this is the Monty'man along with Chris S., and we are wishing God's perfect serenity for you. Bye-bye now. For more recovery workshops with Chris S. and the Monty'man, visit our website at take12radio.com and click on the Recovery Workshops banner.
This has been a broadcast of Take 12 Recovery Radio and KHLT Recovery Broadcasting.
This has been a Chicken and a Pig production.
Kitty, 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 kitty. Meow, meow, meow.
Woof, woof.